Hello there, my much adored viewers. Thanks for the comments. I've been getting back to you all. I don't know if you see the replies. And I've learned a lot, yet again, from you guys about why the civil suit is actually a good idea and what the legal precedent is regarding Watergate and stuff. So I'm shifting on that. I think maybe just do it. And apparently the biggest thing is it means, well, two things. It's got a lower bar for conviction, but also keeps things public, because Mueller could do the most fantastic and thorough job in the world, and we're not going to hear a lot of the nitty-gritty, filthy details. So I'm moving on that, so go the lawsuit. Also, bizarrely, Trump came out and said Cohen's not going to flip on him. He won't flip, he won't flip. Don't even suggest that he won't flip. Is that what you're supposed to say if you're innocent? You know, it's so mob boss. He's really... So that's him. Now, before I launch into the Evangelicals, just a brief fill in from an Australian perspective. When I grew up in Australia, most people went to church, went through the motions. But then something happened in about the 70s and 80s. Church attendance fell through the floor. And I'll be honest with you, American viewers, we tended to roll our eyes when Americans would speak, particularly presidents or anyone, and go on about God and country. And we'd sort of shrug our shoulders and go, really? What happened to the separation of church and state? Isn't that what we all fought for? And we sort of scoffed, I'll be honest. We sort of scoffed at this religiosity of Americans. And now, a couple of decades on from that, we're there. We've got these right-wing Christians that have just co-opted the social space, you know, who fought marriage equality all the way, are fighting sex education in schools. And, of course, the teenage pregnancy rate in America, that has the lowest rate of sex education in schools of all the first world countries, is the highest. There's a direct correlation. And whereas middle-class families will tend to make sure their young women are on contraceptives and can afford to pay for it, and so forth, it tends to be, it's not even just a working class thing, it's more an underclass situation. If you don't have access to free contraception and good information, you're going to end up with a high teenage pregnancy rate, and that in turn is one of the biggest predictors of lifelong poverty. And so in swoop the Evangelicals. Now again, as I was saying back in the day, we even got televised things of Billy Graham back when we were being very atheist as a nation, and going, who would believe this guy? Can you believe that people flocked to these rallies? You know, they were really weird. So it started with him, and they've lurched further and further to the right, and all this crap about prosperity gospel. Ugh. And in Australia, the fastest growing group are Evangelicals or Pentecostals. Someone might like to tell me the difference. I was too lazy to look it up because I've decided I actually don't like either of them. But if you want to let me know the fine prints of what's the difference between a Pentecostal and an Evangelical, I will read it. Okay, so let's go. First of all, I have to have a sip of coffee. All right, so let's see what's coming up for them. Okay. Funny business. Oh, I'll bring this down so you can see me lay them out. Oh, 2 reversals. That's a lot for me. All right. Now, bang in the middle of this, you have the 5 of Swords. Victory, it's also got an element, see, some swords are up and some are down. So there's been victories and there's been losses. One of the interpretations of the 5 of Swords is that it's winning at any cost. Isn't that interesting? Because it's like that's the essence of where they're coming from, in the sense of they will back Trump regardless, winning at any cost. He's their man. It's surreal that this inarticulate playboy guy who has barely darkened the door of a church in 40 years should be their man. Okay, so that's their signifier. Ooh, yuck. Immediate past, the One of Wands, they're flexing their muscles, the Fred Flintstone card, the blunt instrument. They're just putting it out there, and it seems to be working for them. What is their challenge? The 7 of Swords. In the Rider-Waite, that's the rip-off card, you know, the figure stealing away with things. How are they being ripped off? Well, I'm detecting in what I'm reading, there's finally a bit of a split between those evangelicals, and there's quite long-standing ones that are quite socially conservative but not necessarily full-blown evil nutcases, and they're beginning to be worried by the categorical support for Trump. They, of course, are in the minority. Trump is getting huge support from these people. But it is the rip-off card. So I'm hoping that means, because it's near future, they're going to start feeling ripped off. Okay, so what's at the root of their reading? Ooh, the 9 of Cups. The 9 of Cups. So this is a card of massively good things happening, emotional security, things unfolding. Can be a very positive card. I think for them, they're basking in the limelight. I think that's how they feel, you know. Can't argue with that. Okay, now, a bit further in the past, that would make sense. The 2 of Swords, there was a crossroads. People decided to go down the new road, which was this. It actually deviates from Christianity itself. That makes sense. What do I mean by that? I think what I mean by that is classic Christianity is about helping those less fortunate than yourself, of having an open door to the stranger, of welcoming new people, of tolerance. They've moved right away from that and moved into the land of money, which we'll come to shortly. Oh, there's a 3rd reversal. Oh my God, I didn't see that when I laid it out. Well, maybe it was God's hand saying, look at these people closely because they don't represent me. So in the recent past, they made a decision to go down this track. I take that to mean down the track of prosperity gospel. God wants you to be rich, so just stick with us. And if you pay me, your fly-by-night, you know, uneducated ratbag sort of leader of this church, God will love you. So they decided to go down that track. And it has serious implications for all of us, as we'll come to. Okay. So what is overarching this reading? Their primary motivation is Money. Quelle surprise. Money. Money is actually all they care about. Excuse me, that's worth another sip of coffee. You can tell I haven't had one yet. Okay, so Ace of Pentacles' primary motivation is very lowbrow. What about the temple? You know, Jesus upsetting the temple, and a rich man will never get through the eye of a needle and all of that, or whatever. So further out, the first of the reversal, King of Wands, at its benevolent, looking after people, caring about people, making sure people feel safe, reversed, which is fear-mongering. The actual opposite of the kindly king is the reign of terror. And on a funny level, that's what they're embarking upon. They're keeping the voting public suppressed. They're making life hell for young LGBT people by just being savage about everything, the whole gay conversion therapy crap, but making people feel very unsafe. So they're part of whipping up this thing. But I'll return to the race element on this in a while. Such a strange reading. So how do they see themselves? Really rich, with lots of money, and that's a good thing. So their primary drive is money. How they see themselves as successful with money. So they're not thinking in Christian terms at all. This card, the Ten of Pentacles, is that one about family money, intergenerational money. So I'm looking at it as family money in terms of the evangelical movement, the evangelical family. I should have had the Thoth deck, but I don't have it with me. Sorry, Celtic cards. Okay, so what's working against that, or their challenge, is the Seven of Wands, which is conflict. I'm thinking there is more conflict within this movement than we're aware of. I'm sure they're trying to stop from airing their dirty washing. More is going on behind the scenes. There is also a gender split, right? Because if we look back to the Roy Moore, Alabama thing, there were hardwired Republican women who either chose not to vote that one time, and a few who actually went to the other side. His popularity with white evangelical men is still going up. It's dropping with women slightly. Whether that'll translate into them changing a vote or not voting, but there's a gender issue. I said just before, I'll return to the race issue. Now, I'm sure in a lot of these states, the evangelical movement is hugely white, and there are pockets of that in Australia, but there's also this other Pentecostal evangelical thing going on, which is a lot of migrants to Australia joining these groups, and that includes a lot of Chinese. If you look, I'm a sociologist, so we look at the history of things. So if you look at the condemnation of traditional religion for so many decades, and people are now embracing Christianity in unprecedented numbers, but they're also embracing evangelical movements, but also a lot of Pacific Islanders, and I've lived in the Pacific Islander community in Australia on and off for 30 years. It's growing. They're very Christian anyway, even with conventional churches, but they're going a lot of Filipinos. So there is a much more diverse Pentecostal or evangelical movement going on, and I suspect there is in the States too, if you look at the difference between cities maybe and regional areas. I wouldn't be surprised. So all of that's going on, but in terms of this reading, this is about conflict within the evangelical movement and also with the evangelical movement and the outside world. Sorry, copy done. The atmosphere, another reversed card, the Queen of Swords reversed. So the truth seeker reversed. This, I think, could relate to what I was just saying about gender. There's something about women here, and I'm beginning to understand women tend to be more concerned about things like affordable health care. So although women support the gun lobby and so forth in big numbers in the Republican heartland, they also worry about health and they worry about the reproductive stuff, and they are just more concerned with families. So they're beginning to be exposed through the long-term debate on healthcare and beginning to realise it's going to go down the toilet. So it's reversed in that sense. So I think it's a challenge to Republican women, Christian women generally, and evangelical women in particular. The next short-term outcome, which is also reversed, the world. Now, that's the world. Reversed, indicating shutting out the world, closing down, just talking in. So if you look at the states with the highest evangelical component, they're also the states with the weakest public school system. That's not an accident. So you have not only their view of the world as being very narrow and upside down, it's very dangerous because you're not going to be worried about climate change if you think everything's in God's hands and I'm going to be swept up in the rapture along with my children, so why should I worry if there's climate change? So this denial that there were dinosaurs, this denial of science, which is also happening in Australia. It's happening in Australia. We used to lead the world per capita. Our CSIRO, our biggest scientific organisation, world-renowned, now it's starved of funds. Our Great Barrier Reef, the coral reef, is sunbaking. It's burned. It's had, So the evangelicals are an absolute disaster when it comes to public schools because they will send their kids either to a very poor public school or they'll send them to what you call charter schools or whatever, church schools. In any event, they're not getting any science. And this whole idea that God made the world in 6 days is a real worry for all of us. And Trump's latest appointment to NASA, if he gets up, is a climate change denier. I mean, it's like he looks for the worst possible person and gives them the biggest job in that field. It's bizarre. So further out, excellent. 9 of Swords, more conflict which reduces power, and Temperance upside down. I would suggest something really weird has happened in my shuffling here. As you know, regular viewers, how often do I get a reversal? Like, never. Occasionally with the top. And here we go. Up and down. This is reasonable behaviour, looking at other people's points of view, sharing and caring, taking a responsibility for being an ethical and nice person, all those things, upside down. Meaning I can be an evangelical fruitcake of the first order and let my 13-year-old get married to the 32-year-old who had it off with her in the back of the car. That's all right, because it was all part of the plan. So there's probably no news flashes there, so I'm going to do a quick 3 or 4 carder on impact of the evangelicals. Just turn these around, put them back the right way. Impact of the evangelicals on the political scene. let us see. I was going to say let us pray. I was having a moment. All right. The evangelical political influence. Their political influence. Okay. Still getting these. Okay. Well, more reversals. In the middle, again, the world. So what does that mean here in their political influence? Does that mean they're getting stronger around the world? Does that mean they're now accepted? Or does it mean the world has become a weightier and more complex place and they have to rethink what they're about? So, Page of Swords. They've got the Page of Swords and the Page of Cups. In the past, the Page of Swords, they've been fighting this fight and fighting for this influence. Before I get to the Page of Cups, I'll go here, which is the Six of Swords retreat. That's interesting. Also, the Page of Swords also has the implication of the spy. So, this is a funny reading. It's the world, the spy, the moving away. That could be the waning of their influence, although that could be wishful thinking for me. Their short-term outcome, the Page of Cups, a well-intentioned figure who has, if you like, a good heart, but because it's a page, there's a naivety. And there are these doves of peace going around there. So it could be that they might retreat under pressure of the world a bit from their worst excesses and embrace, because this to me, if you look at the imagery, it's more like conventional Christianity. You know, the soft, kind person with the harp and the heavenly music and the doves of peace, drinking from the chalice, and this is the emotional suit. So, if nothing else, that wouldn't be a bad outcome. What else has happened is I've noticed that ministers from Episcopalian, we have it as the Church of England, your Episcopalian and Catholic churches, have actually challenged the leadership of the Evangelicals, going, you know what, this isn't Christianity, this is a really ugly departure. And they're starting to actually engage with that criticism. And of course we have the unique Pope Francis. I think it's a miracle he's escaped assassination. And he calls capitalism capitalism. Oh my God, because he's Argentinian, he actually understands corruption. He's pro doing something about the environment. He also says to Italians at least once a week, open your arms to refugees. Where is your heart? Where is your Christianity? So I think the answer to curbing the excesses of the flat earthers is other Christians. It's no good a rabbit hole zealot like me harping on. They need to hear it from other Christians and be given another way of looking at Christianity. So that's my take for now on the Evangelicals, who for some reason think that Trump was very bad in 2006 with, you know, Stormy Daniels and things, but he hasn't done anything since 2006 that's untoward. They obviously don't believe the Hollywood Access tapes. So there you go. He's just a convert and we didn't know. All right. See you soon.